On today's episode, a fascinating look at an innovative nonprofit and how they've used learning and development to further their cause. All today on The Perfect Route. Welcome to The Perfect Route, and I'm pleased to introduce Ed Herrera from Reform Alliance. Good morning, Ed.
Good morning, Bill. How are you?
I'm doing great. How about you?
Amazing. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Could you tell us a little bit about your role at your organization and what Reform Alliance does?
Sure. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at Reform Alliance, and we were founded out of the Free Meat movement in the late 2010s. And we focus on passing laws around parole and probation, right? We really believe that there is a second chance for people that come out of incarceration, and the current system does not allow for that. And we've been successful because we work across both sides of the aisle. So we've passed 22 bills in 12 states, and we've almost helped 1 million people better their lives. So it's exciting work.
That is excellent. I'm so glad that you and your organization are doing that. It's very important.
Thank you. We appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome. So let's start at the beginning. What first drew you into the world of learning and development?
I think my story is a little bit unique, right? I don't have a typical finance background. I came from a world of humble beginnings and actually worked retail for many years. But in 2013, I decided to go back to school here in New York City. And when I was graduating from an MBA program, I was still in retail back then. And somebody was in my cohort that gave me a chance to be a controller at BMW of Manhattan. So I actually learned accounting, true accounting on the job. Like I was side by side with the accounts receivable person. I was side by side for a whole month next to the billing clerk. And what's interesting about that story is that this particular person, her name is Charlotte, that allowed me, really focus on the learning aspect, right? And her and I had this conversation one night about the importance of if you want to learn it, you can learn it, right? I had the basics of loving math, understanding numbers. I've always been good at that. But the ability to be able to learn and go from a retail job, managing a sales floor, to being a controller, um, it was a unique opportunity. So that really taught me that if you put your mind to it, you can really achieve something. So I've taken the learning and development close to heart as I stepped into the next roles after BMW.
That's an excellent story. Thank you. I remember my accounting courses when I was an MBA student, and I loved them, but my career took me into a different direction in adult education and learning and development. So I haven't looked back. But that is such an interesting start to what you're doing, and how's your perspective on learning and development changed over time?
After BMW, and I was there for 5 years, and I found myself challenged by just corporate America, right? And I sort of did some research and ended up in nonprofit. So this is my third role in nonprofit. I then became the CFO at the LGBT Center of New York, which is second largest in the country. And then after that, I went to a organization called Braven. And what's interesting about Braven is that Braven focuses on delivering a course for college students. And the communities we served there were mostly BIPOC and first generation or immigrants, right, that come to this country and think that the bachelor's degree is the key to a successful career. But we know that that is only part of it.
Hmm.
But the course really focused on delivering the tools, the network, and the confidence to be able to step into a first job after college. And what we found was that 80% of our students that took the course were outpacing their parents' income in that first job. So when you think about economic mobility and you think about building wealth, generational wealth, right? That particular course and learning those skills that e- they were not exposed to in the past, it was so important, right? And we're talking about like how to network, how to speak in front of people, how to build a
Hmm.
resume, um, things that you would take for granted, I think, as you're a college student. But these particular young people did not have that, and that was just really important. And I choose to use the word young people in early career. You want to redo that one?
Yeah, let's redo that one. Sorry about that.
No, no
Let
worries.
me turn on my do not disturb here. Thought I had it on. Oh, it was on. There we go. Okay. Um, I think we'll just start at the top of the question. Um, and we are at, where's the timer? 5 minutes. Okay. Um, so let's start at the beginning. What pulled you into the world of learning and development, and how's your perspective changed over time?
Sure. I have a unique story. I think I did not grow up in the accounting world or finance world. I actually graduated college thinking that I would be able to just get an office job, and that was not the truth. So I ended up in retail for many years. But when I landed in New York, I decided to go back to school. And in 2013, I went into an MBA program thinking that I would just sort of go back and really take advantage of a more formal course, right? And in that program, I met somebody that was the CFO of BMW of Manhattan. And upon graduation, she actually offered me a job as a controller of BMW of Manhattan. Now, coming from a retail background, right, I had some of the basics around loving math, understanding some of the financials. But the important conversation there was that she was able and willing to help me learn on the job, right? So I sat next to the billing clerk, I sat next to the accounts receivable person, like an entire month to be able to learn accounting on the job. And that really taught me the importance of understanding that if you really want to learn something, as long as you have the basics and you put work and hard work into it, and somebody can give you a chance, you really are able to shift your career path and honestly just your future, right? That was a pivotal moment for me going from retail into controllership into now being a C-suite executive and hopefully passing that back on to the staff that I work with today.
Oh, thanks for all that information. That is very helpful. Um, I remember my accounting courses when I was an MBA student. I loved them. Um, and I used them when I was a business professor, but life drew me into adult education. Otherwise, I might have been an accountant.
It,
Um, so that shift from retail into a controller, that must have been quite a shift for you.
Yeah, I remember the first year at BMW. I mean, I was working 8 in the morning to like 11 p.m. And it was various aspects of it. Like I would go home, I would watch YouTube videos about accounting. I would buy books specifically to accounting, right? And the interesting thing is that, well, the good thing about accounting is that you do have that month end process that's very, it's the same process every single month. So that allowed me to be able to iterate and get faster and quicker. And I mean, there was a lot of mistakes that happened, but again, the person that gave me the opportunity was kind enough to show me the way. And I still, to this day, take some of the quotes where, she taught me about auditing and just how you manage through some of the financials.
Hmm. What a great opportunity to be mentored and have that on the job training. And, my experience with graduate students, especially ones who haven't worked, is similar to what you discussed in many ways. And I'm so glad you got the opportunity to advance in your career to where you are now as a chief operating officer. That must give you an interesting perspective on strategy. And one thing that pops to mind for me is there a recent initiative that learning and development has done that captured its strategic potential inside Reform Alliance?
Yeah, absolutely. I can share with you a couple of things. I think after BMW, right, I just felt myself just thinking about how corporate America operates and how we treat people, right? And I figured there was a better way to do both, be in this world and also take care of staff, particularly. So I ended up in nonprofit. I was the CFO of the LGBT Center of New York during the pandemic. And then I moved on to a company called Braven. I was at Braven for 3 years, scaled them, tripled in size. But I'll tell you that particular story, which is interesting. Braven runs a course within higher education partners. So San Jose State University, the CUNY system in New York, Spelman College down in Atlanta. And what that course was, it was a semester long course, And it taught the students about the skills, networks, and the abilities to be able to step into a strong job. Now, the students that we work with were Pell Grant eligible students. They were students that were coming from low income families. And what we found was that through that learning in that one semester, right, these 80% of our students were outpacing their parents' income in that first job. So when you talk about economic mobility, when you think about building generational wealth, that's extremely important to understand that one course can really redirect you in your life. So Braven was, a very fulfilling, I would say, part of my career so far. As I stepped into Reform Alliance in the last 12 months, I've been here for a year, actually, just this month. What I'm looking at is that 40% of our staff is formerly incarcerated or justice impacted. And my goal here is through a series of learning and development courses, trainings, like support. I want to get these folks ready for the job, right? For the corporate job. If they ever choose to leave Reform, I want to ensure they have the skills and the ability to be able to thrive in that environment. One of the things that I've learned from a previous CEO was one of the biggest forms of racism is to not give feedback. And
Mhm.
currently at Reform, we're about 81% BIPOC individuals of staff. So that's really at the core of how we move forward with helping these particular staff if they ever choose to leave Reform.
That's interesting about the feedback piece. I wasn't aware of that disparity, but it's a serious disadvantage.
Yeah, I mean, it took me a moment after that CEO said that I had to really think about it. And the reality is that sometimes you're in corporate America and, you make a mistake like we all do. You're a young person, your early career, and your manager holds so much power. They can either choose to give you the feedback and redirect you, or they can put a target on your back and say, Mary is not working or James is not working out. So it's really important, I think, to have the accountability for ourselves. And that's what I'm teaching the staff here. As a matter of fact, next week we have a retreat in DC that we're taking the whole staff. And we're intentionally doing a session on how to give and receive feedback,
Hmm.
right? Because when somebody has been incarcerated for 25 years and this is their first role, it's daunting to be told, hey, there's gaps in how we work together. So we're positioning this particular training session and saying that feedback, receiving and giving feedback goes beyond the job, right? This is a life sort of tool, and hopefully it goes really well. I'll make sure to tell you about it after we go through it, though.
Okay. Oh, thank you. Um, are there any gaps or underdeveloped areas in your learning programs?
Yeah, I would say, the interesting thing about being a nonprofit is that, the resources are always tight, right? It's just quite a challenge to allocate resources to some of these pieces of work. You have to be very intentional. So as I think about budgeting, right, I'm a chief operating officer at Reform that owns finance, HR, which can always have a tension, right? I don't know if you've read that on LinkedIn where many people side with saying HR should report to the CEO. And most recently, I actually disagreed with somebody online about as long as you are centered in the people that you are serving as a staff, I think it's okay to have, right? I mean, the resources are limited. So I can't have a CFO and then me be a CEO in this particular organization. But I would say ensuring that the conversation stays centered around people and they are being your most valuable asset, right? When you look at nonprofit finances in comparison to for profit, nonprofit, I would say roughly 70 to 80% of your expenses are salaries, right? When you look at a for profit, when you look at BMW, you're talking about 15% of your expenses are salaries. So just when you see those buckets, it's extremely important to understand that at least in the nonprofit world, people are your asset, regardless of what space you're in. So funding is always something that needs to be centered, but it is a challenge, especially in today's times and how many nonprofits are currently having challenges with their funding.
Yes, it's unfortunate how things have changed over the last year. I know several nonprofits that have been affected seriously, especially in their budgets, and so many organizations are holding their breath to see what comes next.
Yeah,
Um,
I serve as a treasurer on the National Center of Teacher Residencies. In that particular organization, it's a small org, right? 10 million or so. It's about 25 people. Um, but their focus is to bring men into I mean, more teachers, but really men and men of color to come into the teaching workforce because mostly it's white women, and we want to make sure that we have students that find themselves in these teachers and receive different mentorship, right, from various individuals. And we're starting a new year, and there's definitely a conversation around funding and just that entire world, how it's been challenging lately.
yes, the Q4 discussions about the upcoming fiscal are becoming interesting, and I know a couple of organizations that turned their fiscal in July or October. They've already had those tough discussions, and they're still looking at their plan B and plan C just in case. Um, are there any important leadership capabilities that Reform Alliance is trying to build right now, and how does L&D support that effort?
Yeah, absolutely. So I came in at a time, I wouldn't call it turmoil, but I came in at a time of change, right? And change is something that's inevitable, right? We all know that. But when I came in, there was a new CEO that had been named, which is Jessica Jackson, and there was a brand new leadership team. And I think whenever you have that much change within the leadership team, the staff, there's always this underlying tension or like nervousness. So one of the things that we're building here is number one, um, really trust building, right? And stand by what you say, especially in the nonprofit world as well, right? A lot of staff and people come into the nonprofit world with the understanding that they'll have a voice, right? It is
Hmm.
more common for them to be able to voice their opinion and have a particular view on how the organization should be ran or where we should be driving impact in the communities we serve. So I think that was really important. And one of the things that I've done is that we had 20-minute sessions one-on-ones with every single staff member, heard them, listened to them, what were their concerns, and then put in a place and plan that talks about trust building. And part of that is also financial literacy, right? I'm a
Hmm.
big believer that one of the things that I do really well, which I think has helped me over my career, is that because I didn't come from a background of finance, I'm really able to translate financial, you know, numbers and anything that's financially driven into much more digestible pieces. So we hold a monthly session with staff around how we're doing financially, what our budget looks like. So right now we're closing up the budget. We're presenting to the board of the next month for our next fiscal year. But I want them to understand where the resources are going. And I'm also very transparent in the way that we talk about compensation, right? We pay for the job, we want to support them. If there's an opportunity, we're a small org, we're about 50 people. So there's not always opportunities to grow, but I want to get them ready for that next step, whether it's internally or externally, right? I really believe that everybody has a journey, and reform or any organization is a part of that journey. But ultimately, when you look back, that is a very long journey. And whether you stay at an organization for 5 years, 10 years, it's still a small part of what that story sounds like.
And do you find that your efforts are helping employee retention?
I believe so. I think transparency has been welcomed, right? I think a lot of people, um, at least in this particular org, felt like, everything was like sort of not behind closed doors, but it just wasn't shared in the way that we are sharing it now. Um, I'm also having to have difficult conversations, right? Where if somebody does want to grow with the org, there may not be an opportunity to grow within the next 18 to 24 months. So what does that look like for them? And, recently I just had a conversation where maybe it may not be the right fit anymore, right? And I supported them and I said, it's important for you to be able to think about what you want out of your life. And we're always going to be here, but sometimes life just has a way of redirecting you, right? And I help hopefully take that in and be able to go through that process without feeling a certain way. Because I do want them here, but I also think that there's responsibility on the org to have the systems in place so you don't have single points of failure
Hmm.
in one of your departments.
And that's especially challenging in a organization with, you know, 50 headcount. It, you've got everybody's wearing multiple hats.
Yeah, and that's really important point because I will say that it's so interesting, right? You have a small team of operations, for example, under me that's about 7 folks, right? So when somebody's like on vacation for a week, like you feel it. You just feel because there's so much work to do, and at the same time, there's certain specifics areas that we all cover. So yeah, really, really important.
Hmm. That brings up another question. Let's say you had the opportunity to redesign your organization's learning function from scratch. What would you do differently?
Going off of the last topic, right? I've seen L&D be a part of this like sort of training and we need to get it out there. But the reality is that the there's passion behind learning, right? Everybody that I've met in one way or another wants to do their best, right? I wholeheartedly believe that people don't wake up and say, I'm going to do wrong, whether or not, somebody's performing or not. I just don't believe that. I believe that people may make the wrong decisions or, be in a situation where they may not make the best decision. But what I've seen is that it is a training sort of aspect. I would love to see it much be more of a strategy, right? And strategy and also be tied to knowledge management. Because I do believe that one of the biggest gaps that we have is that if somebody leaves, you lose all this institutional knowledge, right?
Hmm.
You want to get better over time and the roles may not change as much, but if somebody leaves, you're sort of like restarting from scratch. So learning and development for me has two prongs, right? One of them is going to be institutional knowledge, org-wide processes. How do you get better within the role? But also there's a personal development aspect, right? If somebody wants to be better at speaking in front of folks, right? How do you help them do that? Whether you give them opportunities to work at hosting the retreat, for example, next week, right? Or being the ones
Hmm.
that are presenting something. So I just don't think it's so much of a training, but it's much more of a strategy, right? And how do
Hmm.
you tackle each one? And I know it's hard, but I really, really believe that part of our jobs as leaders is to slow down and be able to have these conversations and not just be putting out fires on a daily basis.
It's a great example of living out your organization's mission and values.
Yes, and through the way that we work with the communities we serve, we're actually launching a brand new program called Work Matters as well, which will be interesting in just the idea of economic mobility, but also there'll be an aspect of learning and development in that as well. So, yeah, we tie it internally, and then we hopefully can also put the resources externally as we move in the world.
Excellent. Excellent. Um, any closing thoughts for our audience?
I mean, the only thing I would say is that I've learned, I've always believed that my story is not unique. And over time, I've had two or three people say to me, you don't think you did anything special, but you want to share your story because somebody may see you and say, wow, there's an opportunity to do something. And, having come from a background of humble beginnings, my approach has always been like, I have to succeed. There's no other answer, right? I'll figure it out. I'm a figure it out kind of guy, regardless of what
Hmm.
happens. And the only thing that I would say is that ask for mentorship, right? I think
Hmm.
everybody's busy, but if you don't ask, you don't get. And yeah, I mean, it's really like a unique opportunity because somebody will be willing to give you a chance, and it could change your life.
So important, so important. And it's an integral part of what Reform Alliance does. If our viewers and listeners wanted to find out more about Reform Alliance, what's the organization's web address?
Sure. It's www.reformalliance.com. Um, like I said, we got started in 2019. We came out of the Free Meat movement. You may recognize some of our board members. Jay-Z, Michael Rubin, Robert Kraft are on our board. So we're a unique organization in the way we work, but you can always sign up to be a reformer and stay in on the work that we're doing.
Excellent. I'm going to do that myself. I'm
Thank
so
you.
impressed with your organization and the clarity that you have, not only in your role, but in the clarity your organization has in developing the teammates and doing the work.
Thank you. We appreciate you.
You're welcome. And that wraps us up for another episode of The Perfect Route. Thanks for watching and listening, and we will be with you again soon. Take care, everybody, and thanks, Ed.
Have a good one.